We're so glad that you have joined us tonight for our first session of Renewing Your Mind speaker series. This series will explore the vision and mission priorities of Coral Ridge. Our vision is simple. We desire to equip gospel-centered, culture-shaping Christians. And we want to help you understand why we do what we do here at Coral Ridge, since our actions are a result of our beliefs. This series, Renewing Your Mind, is based off of Romans chapter 12, verse 2, where Paul calls us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Renewing Your Mind will air every Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m. for 5 weeks. And this series will feature renowned experts, theologians, and pastors who will help us connect our beliefs to our everyday lives. To see a full lineup of speakers and topics, please visit crpc.org/RYM. Well, tonight we're joined by Tony Reinke, who serves as a senior writer for Desiring God, the teaching ministry of John Piper. And he also hosts the popular podcast, Ask Pastor John, which addresses questions of theology, ethics, and Christian living. Tony's most recent book, Competing Spectacles, which is Treasuring Christ in the Digital Age, published by Crossway, explores what it means to spiritually thrive in an age of visual enticements. His other book, 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You, draws from the insights of numerous thinkers, published studies, and his own research as he identifies 12 potent ways our smartphones have changed us for good and for bad. Tony currently resides in the Phoenix area with his wife and 3 children. And tonight, Tony will be discussing how we can raise children who thrive spiritually in the midst of an era driven by technology. And we'll explore how we best navigate parenthood during this unprecedented time in our culture. So please welcome Tony Reinke. Tony, so good to have you with us tonight.
It's an honor for me to be here. So thanks for the invitation. I'm going to take these headphones off and we're going to open up to Genesis chapter 2 is where we start and just look at a couple passages before we move on. You know, parents feel themselves, especially on the front lines of a battle right now in this age of trying to raise tech competent kids who are not swept away by the smartphone and its overuse. It's not easy. And there's a lot before we begin. Let me rewind all the way back to the beginning, long before phones, all the way back to Genesis chapter 2, to the garden, where Adam was told in Genesis 2:15 to work the garden and to keep it, to work it and to keep it. So for the garden to flourish, Adam was to labor in the soil, he was to work it, and he was called to protect and guard it, or to keep it. So he would sweat and dig, and he would discern and defend. So he would have a shovel in one hand and a sword in the other hand. And this language of working and keeping, first used of Adam, is later going to be applied to God's priests in Numbers chapter 18. So Adam was not only the first husband and the first father, he was also the prototype of God's very first priest and God's first temple, which is basically what Eden was originally. It was a temple for God, and Adam was its priest. Now, when God prohibited Adam from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Eve didn't exist yet in Genesis 2. So when Eve took that first bite, it was a sin on Adam's failure to lead well. He was called to celebrate truth, to obey, and to chase out the snakes, but he let the deceiver in, and thereby he fell from protecting his wife and his garden from satanic lies. Adam's priestly garden to keep the garden is something of a charter for all parents in the digital age. Our homes are garden temples of a sort. We keep and we protect our homes because Satan still spouts his lies. Even to this day, through digital communications, his slippery lies slither into our homes via screens, through misleading marketers, through prophets of materialism, through false promises of social media self-glorification, and by this vast digital empire now of pornography. So guarding and keeping our homes is an attentiveness to what slithers in through the weeds of the Wi-Fi. And so I find it helpful to sort of orient Genesis 2 to kind of see that we have a calling like that of Adam in seeking to protect, guard our homes, to guard our children. And obviously that's a massive, massive, daunting challenge that we all feel in parenting in the digital age. I have 3 teens Right now, we now currently have 3 teens. One just turned 13, and so we feel this very acutely, my wife and I. In our time together, we're going to focus on the habits of a generation between the ages of 8 and 25. This generation is now labeled post-millennial or Gen Z or iGen. I'm going to use that label iGen. And I want to take a few moments to introduce you to the research on this generation, because iGen is a label given to those born between 1995 and 2012. Roughly 74 million Americans, about 24% of the US population. It's the most diverse generation in American history. It's also the most digitally connected generation ever. And iGeners were born sort of after the internet was commercialized in 1995. So have no pre-internet memories. They were born into the age of the commercial web. And each of them have entered or will enter into adolescence in the smartphone age. Okay, so they're digital natives, and their parents, myself and probably many of you, are mostly digital immigrants. We're sort of learning this later on. Kids grew up in it. Gene Twenge, a psychologist at San Diego State University, wrote the most the largest of iGen, and published it in a book called iGen: Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adulthood. It's the title of her book. Tom Hanks presented a generation in the movie Big, children impatient for adulthood. iGen is the complete opposite. These means postponing adulthood in a lot of cases. And Twenge's extensive study can be summarized in basically 3 words. iGeners are safe. They're safe. They are the first generation to grow up with active shooter drills at school since kindergarten. They are the most protected generation by parents. By preference, they are the most self-cloistered generation that we've seen. Taking all the evidence together, iGen teens are more likely to be homebodies. Compared to previous generations, iGeners are statistically less likely to go to parties, go on dates, to get their driver's licenses, to drink alcohol, to smoke tobacco, to ride without a seatbelt, or to experiment with sex. Now, many of those are good things, right? And we should celebrate the turn from foolish behavior. But as Twenge points out, if you take these all together, these trends offer us a portrait of behavior that marks a generation that is plagued by delayed adulthood and prolonged adolescence. Okay. Delayed adulthood and prolonged adolescence. That's one of the characteristic traits that you see in iGen. Oh, did we lose? Still on? Okay. For some reason, is everything still working on your end? Thumbs up. Okay, good. So delayed and prolonged adolescence. That's not all. Along with these 2 factors, we see 4 other things that are worth noting as we start this evening. Number 1, they are smartphone natives. I kind of mentioned that before. The average age for a child getting the first smartphone in the US is now 10.3 years old. Many of these phones are hand-me-downs from mom and dad, but over 90% of teens today have smartphones. They are smartphone natives. They are quick with thumbs and confident in navigating the online world. Number 2, they're most likely to be at home and online. Even prior to the virus that we're all struggling with right now, iGeners spent less time working jobs, volunteering, engaged in student activities. The result is that they're spending vast amount of time online at home. They're virtually never offline, pushed to their devices by the ubiquity of smartphones in the lives of their peers. Number 3, they are secularizing. Among iGen teens and tweens, about 1 in 4 do not attend a religious service or practice any form of religious spirituality. iGeners are more likely than any generation in human history to be raised by religiously unaffiliated parents. And number 4, they are lonelier and depressed. By far, the most concerning takeaway from Twenge's research, and confirmed by others, is the spike in teenage depression. Between 2012 and 2015, in just 3 years' time, depression among boys rose 21%, and depression among girls rose 50%. These upticks were equally reflected in suicide rates. After declining during the 1990s and stabilizing in the 2000s, the suicide rate for teens has risen again. 46% more 15 to 19-year-olds committed suicide in 2015 than did in 2007. And 2.5 times more 12 to 14-year-olds killed themselves in that time frame. Twinge says this: it is an exaggeration to describe iGen as being on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. And much of this deterioration, she points to, can be traced back to the ubiquity of the smartphone in the life of iGen. So Twinge begins to point to a problem that really a whole generation that's shielded from everything from abduction and car accidents and drugs and alcohol, sex and food allergies, and even safe from people who disagree with them. iGen is all about safety. And in a newer book titled The Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, they take this research and push it even further to suggest that overly protected iGeners are emotionally ill-prepared for the rough and tumble world of online peer relationships. We know this from Facebook online. Facebook relationships are rough. They're tumble, right? It's not a safe place, you know. And so iGeners who are used to sort of being in a safe place and in being kind of raised within a bubble where there's no challenges, when they go online and they face online bullying or shaming or disagreements or conflict or the pain of being excluded from their peers or slighted or ghosted, there's a lack of stability in the face of those online hostilities, and that feeds this spike in anxiety and depression. And this is not limited to middle schools or high schools. In January, I attended a major Christian conference where a reality TV star that you would probably all recognize name stood on the stage and said, after traveling to dozens of college campuses and speaking to students on all sorts of private, Christian, secular, state-run, all sorts of schools, she went to dozens of them. What she found is that college is overwhelmed with isolation, anxiety, loneliness, and depression, all caused or amplified by smartphone overuse. So the stakes are high. We need a game plan. Number one, I'm not a parenting guru. Okay, I don't aspire to be a parenting guru. I'm just a journalist that's intrigued by technology and media, and I'm a parent of 3 teens, and I want to lead them well. And so I put together some thoughts for other parents to learn from, but I'm not a super parent. Okay, I'm just in the trenches with you. Number two, and I'm sure many of you already understand this, but good parenting is never about plug and play principles that I just transfer to you. Like I just give you the principle, you take it and you plug it into your family. That's not how it works, right? Parent-to-parent learning is about inspiration and adaptation. So you might hear new ideas from me. I hope you're inspired, motivated, but you'll always need to fit that new idea to the personal characteristics, the temptations, the challenges, the needs of your kids, okay? So I hope I can inspire, but obviously take the spirit of the principle, not the actual application of the principle. I'm sure that makes sense to a lot of you who are trying to parent well. You're just trying to learn from other parents. All right, 10 suggestions on how to raise iGeners in the digital age. Number one, if your kid has a smartphone, keep the letdown fresh. Keep the letdown fresh. Journalist Nancy Jo Sales wrote a fascinating and very frightening book titled American Girls, Social Media, and the Secret Lives of Teenagers. If you're a dad of girls, read that, and it will also keep you up at night. American Girls, Social Media, and the Secret Lives of Teenagers. Nancy Jo Sales recounts one conversation that she had with a teenage girl who said to her, quote, "Social media is destroying the lives of teen girls." Okay. That's what this teen said to Sales. Then Sales asked the girl, so why don't you go offline? Then the girl looked at her and responded, quote, "Because then we would have no life." You get that? Teenage girl saying the smartphone is taking away my life. The question is, well, why don't you give it up? She said, well, then I will have no life. You see how that works? Teens really, really want phones. When it comes to phones, their affections come alive, grasping, grabbing. Our kids will load into the phone all their hopes and dreams of happiness. And social media, where teens are going to look for their life. And what does it cost them? It'll cost them their life. It'll promise them joy. It'll take their joy. So we got to pull off this mask of that false trade. You're looking for life in a place that's taking life from you. Okay. And we just need to keep that fresh for our teenagers. How it works. And part of the role the parents have in this age is to keep that reality fresh. Indeed, it's one of the great gifts that you can give your son or daughter in this age is to help them see the vanity of the lie that social media and TikTok and YouTube will make them happier. It rarely, in any significant way, will. Keep that fresh for them. We're going to come back to this and look at this later on, looking at the affections, because there's a lot more to say. But number 2, delay smartphones at least until you understand how teens use them. This is really key. Once you introduce your child to a mobile connected phone with Ting, and especially with an app like Snapchat, parental controls are virtually futile. Again, going back to Nancy Jo Sales in her book, she investigates the troubling phenomenon of girls receiving unsolicited nude selfies from boys in texts, often as a first of a boy showing interest in a girl, and then boys asking for the girls to send nudes in return. In an article published in a major newspaper under the title, "Teens Stop Asking for Nude Photos." Imagine that. Major US newspaper headline, "Teenagers Stop Asking for Nude Photos." Psychologist Lisa Damore said that in a study of 500 girls, 12 to 18 years old, over 2/3 of them had been asked for explicit images of themselves by a boy, a peer. Quote, "The majority described facing pressure that often began with promises of affection and discretion in exchange for nudes before accelerating to persistent requests, anger display, harassment, and threats." As one research participant explained about being pressured by her boyfriend, quote, "Boyfriend pressured me for hours to send him pictures of me naked. I did. Now he threatens to send them out to others if I don't send him even more explicit pictures. The stuff I have to do is unbelievable, and I'm just 14. So why is sexting among teenagers so common, this trading of nude selfies? How did that become a common practice for a boy to show interest in a girl by initiating his interest by sending her an unsolicited, unasked for nude picture of himself? It just is. It got co-opted into the normal sexual behavior of teens in the world. Both boys and girls sending images back and forth is a form of normal teenage sexuality. That's what this article calls it. It's normal. It's been normalized, and we're trying to break that normalized practice. And it's not just happening outside of Christian circles. This is what's crazy. I was just before coronavirus shut everything down, I was in a local church, a great Bible preaching local church. I love this church. It was a church plant from a great church. I mean, just everything about it is amazing. I give this presentation, I give this talk. At the end, a dad comes up to me and says, "My daughter is receiving nude images from a boy in the youth group. What do I do?" Okay. This is not just in the world. This is a youth group in a healthy local church. Okay. And so we walked through it, and that led to a very awkward conversation between the dad of the daughter, who was alerted, telling the dad of the boy who didn't know, and them having a conversation as brothers in Christ about what to do. Okay. So there's marching orders for dads of boys. You know what to tell your boys. Okay. That's unacceptable behavior. It's not how we relate to girls. And girls, they need to be aware of how this works and what's going on. All that to say, resist the pressure to give your kid a smartphone too soon. And when you do, be on the same page here. There is virtually no parental control to limit what your child gets texted to them. So when these porn links or nude pics arrive on their phone, your child, she needs to know, or he needs to know, they're not alone. So have this conversation and work it out. What happens when a peer texts them a nude selfie? This is a mutual problem that you need to work out on the front end. You don't want your teen hiding this in shame and assuming, if I tell my parents about this, they're going to freak out and take my phone away. Okay? Don't make it that simple. Parents, if you give your child a smartphone, you bear consequences for that decision. Don't put this all on your teen and put them in a position where she, especially your daughter, shrinks back in shame when something like this happens. Not to be aware of the temptations that you are giving your children when you give them a smartphone, and have a game plan of what to do when things go bad. Okay. Now, I've gotten way ahead of things because I want to back up and actually talk about parents who have younger kids. Okay. You're probably watching this right now and just being introduced to this whole new world, kind of freaking out. Well, let's go back and let's talk about sort of like raising younger kids in the home to be digitally aware. And this is what I put as point number 3. Inside of the home, you want to moderate the Wi-Fi. Inside of the home, moderate the Wi-Fi. In your home, in our home, our default is to keep the Wi-Fi off to devices until those are needed for a productive reason. So many routers allow you to pause service in a home. I've been impressed with a device called the Circle. The circuit's besides our router home, and it gives me the power to cut off Wi-Fi entirely or to a specific device based on content filters, ratings, time limits, bedtimes, and it breaks a Wi-Fi connection between the router and a device or a computer. So instead of having to set up parental controls on each and every device in the home, you can control the flow of data to every single device. It's brilliant. I love the way it works. In fact, I can pause the Wi-Fi at home to smart TVs, to 3 different laptops, to iPods, to iPads, to iPhones. It can all be disconnected from Wi-Fi with one button, and I can do it remotely as well. So Circle devices, I'm not saying the Circle device is the device to use, but it's the one that sort of led the development to giving parents a lot of power over what the Wi-Fi is used for. So in our home, when a child wants to use the computer, they make a request, they explain what they need, why they need it, and more can be said there. But it's a small way to help them bring clear purpose to their own tech use. Like, why is it that you need the iPad right now? Why is it you need the computer right now? What do you want to accomplish? And be involved in helping them to think through the wise use of technology. So great parental controlled routers today, things that we didn't have when our kids were really young, and I wish we did, but there's a lot of great tools. Most routers have these features built into them already. You don't have to buy a secondary device. So take some time to get familiar with the tools that are already available to you. Number 4, outside of the home, connect without smartphones for as long as possible. Outside of the home, connect without smartphones for as long as possible. Parents want phone technology to deliver 4 things, right? We want to be able to call our kid whenever, we want our kid to be able to call us whenever, we want to text each other, and we want to know where they're at via GPS. Those are basically the 4 functions that we're looking for in a digital device, and you don't necessarily need a smartphone to do this. Ask your mobile carrier for the latest options to meet these criteria. For 5 to 10-year-olds, we've used in the past something called the Verizon Gizmo, which is basically, it looks like a smartwatch, but it's basically just a speakerphone that can call 6 different numbers. It's got a GPS built into it and very basic texting functionality. So very limited technology. You want to look into, like, how can I get those 4 functions in something that's not a smartphone? Okay. Now, here's the thing. Carriers they're making billions of dollars off phone data. Okay. So data limited phones of any kind are contrary to the whole mindset of a carrier. It's not easy to find these devices, but you need to look. Limit the functions that you need, and then find the dumbest version that you can find of that. Okay. Do a little bit of research and see, like, how can I get these 4 functions without buying a smartphone? Is it possible? Check out the Verizon Gizmo. That's one that we've used in the past. It's also important to set up parental controls on an iPhone or an Android. We're an Apple family, and as of a couple of years ago, Apple makes it really easy, and you can find some really great tutorial videos on YouTube for how to set up parental controls on an iPhone, an iPad, a MacBook, whatever it is. You can just go on YouTube and find a tutorial for setting that up. But as technologies change and as teens use different apps for different purposes, we parents will need to rely on one another in the local church for wisdom, okay? So I'm hoping this gathering, this evening together, will launch a conversation that will continue on in your church, that needs to continue as apps change, as devices change, as needs change. But in general, if you cannot offer parental controls on a device, especially a smartphone, make do with a flip phone for as long as possible. It's really important. Don't jump to the smartphone too soon. Number 5, Stairstep Technology over the years. Number 5, Stairstep Technology over the years. See, the smartphone is an accumulation of every communications technology a child has been introduced to from birth. Okay. So to be given a smartphone is sort of a graduation into the most potent and most powerful technology that the digital age offers us. And so here's one way to outline those steps as you parent young kids, especially because once you take control over the home Wi-Fi, that's crucial. Once you begin by taking control of the Wi-Fi and you know what devices are being used when and for what purposes, then you can begin to introduce technologies to your kids inside of your home in a very safe way. Okay. So what my wife and I did is we sat down with each kid and we took a piece of paper horizontally and put 0 on the top left corner and 18 on the top right corner. And then what we did is we stair-stepped the introduction to various technologies from the bottom left to the top right. Okay. So at some point early on, you might introduce a tablet with coloring and educational games. Maybe at age 3, that's a step up. So that's the first step from in the bottom left corner. Whenever you start, maybe age 3, whenever that is, step up. Then you introduce maybe a tablet with educational videos for them to watch. Maybe that's age 4, 5, 6. Whenever step up, that's a new use of technology that you're introducing to them. Then at some point, maybe you introduce a family computer in the living room for writing projects at school. I don't know when that would be for various school, homeschool, public school, online school. Again, I use that a little bit differently. Maybe it's age 8. I don't know. I'm just generally using age 8, but that's a step up. So there's a new use of technology introduced to your child's life. And then at some point, maybe you introduce a speakerphone, the Verizon Gizmo for kids. Maybe it's a simple flip phone. Maybe it's a dumb phone. Step up. That's another step up. You're able to call them remotely. Then you maybe allow Google searches for research. Maybe that's at age 10. You start to introduce browsers where they can make searches and go into Wikipedia. Maybe that's age 10, 12, whenever. Step up. Then perhaps at some point you introduce Facebook with Messenger or apps, some way for them to contact family and friends. Maybe that's age 12, 13, whenever you're going to introduce those. You're introducing each stage up. You're introducing a new level of technology to your kids. And then comes the capstone. The capstone is the smartphone. That is the big graduation. Age 14, 16, 18, whenever, never, you decide when is your kid going to get a smartphone. The advantages to this are twofold. Number one, you can accordion out the steps as needed while showing your child where the smartphone fits into the digital trajectory you've set for them. Smartphone's coming, but it shows them you being faithful in small things will lead to us trusting you with big things. And number two, what it also does is it reminds parents that once you give your child a smartphone with a mobile data plan, you move from having strong parental control over your child's internet experience, like in the home, to having much less. You can draw a bold black line between all the steps on the left, which is Wi-Fi at home, and the smartphone on the right, which is mobile web everywhere. That's a graduation. That's a major step because, again, they can be texted things. They can see things on Snapchat, if you allow that app to be used, in which you would never know that it even came into their phone. It's a graduation. So Stairstep Technology, that's very rough, and you can do it a lot of different ways. To just think about technology as being steps that you're leading towards the smartphone as a graduation. Number 6, consider not buying a teen their own smartphone. Consider not buying a teen their own smartphone. Instead of giving a teen their quote unquote own phone, I think it's better to speak of the smartphone in terms of a gift on loan in the form of an experiment. The phone is purchased by, owned by, and all the monthly services are paid by mom and dad. This is a family phone. This is mom and dad's phone. This arrangement is made clear from the outset that this phone is and will remain mom and dad's phone. So son or daughter may buy a special case for it, special headphones for it, fine. But the phone itself is not owned by them. It is lent to them. It is part of an experiment called having a smartphone. Okay. That leads into number 7, write out a smartphone contract. Since the smartphone is an open experiment to test teen maturity and responsibility, mom and dad can set very clear expectations in a written contract to cover a few baseline expectations on content, apps, personal behaviors, and family engagement. So a smartphone contract can make expectations really clear. It can say things like, this phone is going to be charged in mom and dad's room from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's not going to be in the bedroom. at night, or this phone is not to be jailbroken or hacked to bypass parental controls. This phone is going to be used for a limited number of apps for productivity, and no new apps will be added without mom and dad's authorization, something Apple makes very easy now. Kids who have iPhones can't get a new app unless mom and dad approve it. Really helpful. Things like this are helpful, and you can go online and look at other smartphone contracts and find lots of other things to build into that. Again, family engagement, like you can use it. All sorts of different types of parenting challenges that you face can be just brought into this. Like, to have this phone, we expect you to be in church on Sunday. To have this phone, you can come at a lot of different angles of behavioral necessity with this phone contract as well. So things like that are helpful. When considering violations of the agreement, then you can set the consequences out very clearly. For example, on the first violation, dad takes back his phone and deactivates it for 1 week. On the second violation, dad takes his phone back and deactivates it for a month. Third violation, dad takes back the phone and the smartphone experiment comes to a halt. And experiment is the key word. We are conducting a trial, an experiment to see if our teen is mature enough for such a powerful technology. And here's where the parenting wisdom has to come into play, right? Because this contract is not a demand for digital perfection. It's intended to set fair and reasonable expectations to create a space for our kids to learn and grow and mature in responsibly using a potent technology like this. The contract is in place for a teen to demonstrate their growth in responsibility. And when that growth stops, the phone experiment is over and the phone is gone. Point number 8. This grew out of my parenting mistakes and something that I learned late, and I wish I'd learned it earlier. But number 8, lead with the future. Lead with the future. How do we encourage our kids that being set apart are different than their peers who all have phones at age 10.3? How do we prove to them that it's actually valuable for them not to have a phone until later? How do we get at their hearts when it feels like it's unfair? How do we get parent them in such a way that they don't see it as being left behind, but as being set apart for something else? How do we envision our kids for the future? That became, for me, really the key in parenting in the digital age. That is, I need to give my kids something that's going to drive them beyond the peer-to-peer drama of social media. What is that going to be? That, I think, is my biggest challenge as a father. And it took me back to some of the research that I did when I was writing 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. And what I realized is that the college students that have the healthiest smartphone habits are pre-law and pre-med majors. Pre-law and pre-med majors. Why is that? It's obvious. They are aiming at such a huge goal that looms ahead. They have an all-encompassing goal in mind. It demands their full attention, and thus it deprioritizes things that are non-essential, like social media. Okay. When I went back to that research, I realized, okay, there's the parenting takeaway here. And that is that because there's a lack of purpose so oftentimes when we open our phones, we have to parent that much harder. As soon as our kids, get into high school or start, freshman, sophomore, even early on in high school, you want to get them thinking about college, thinking about a major, thinking about a career, thinking about a dream of a university. Get them on college campuses. This is what I started to do with my kids just in the last 4 years. Like, as soon as they hit high school, like, get them on college campuses and envision them that the world is so much bigger than the peer-to-peer drama in high school that they're going to face. Okay. Don't get lost in high school. Don't get lost in Snapchat streaks or TikTok or the latest popular app of their peers. Get their eyes up on a bigger goal and show them the exciting possibilities that's ahead. Envision them for what God may have for them. Because here's what I know about everyone that's watching, everyone. God made you and he claims you. He claims you. He designed your life. He designed my life for 2 core priorities that are clearly laid out in the Bible. You were called, you were created to treasure Christ above everything else and everyone else. That's number 1. And number 2, out of your delight in him and how beautiful he is, you pour yourself out in Christ-like love to meet legitimate needs in the lives of others. That's your purpose. That's why God made you. Now, trying to figure out that second step of how do I love my neighbor, that's vocation. That is mission. That is stay-at-home mom. That is all of that is wrapped up in that second thing. So it's going to be complex, and it's going to take a lifetime to understand what God has called you to do in loving others. But that's the heart of that's the heart of our purpose. Love Christ above all things, and out of that joy, love your neighbor. And so what we're trying to do in the digital age is we're trying to envision our kids for a life of purpose. And healthy smartphone habits are nearly impossible for anyone. For daughter, for son, for mom, for dad, if we lack vision and purpose. The fight against smartphone abuse isn't just about willpower, it's about vision. And we as parents need to lead our kids with a vision of the future that's more compelling than the drama that they see in social media. That, I think, is really gets at the heart of the challenge of parenting in the digital age. All right, number 9, keep building the local church. Keep building the local church. The stats are in, and iGen is now the loneliest generation in America. They are lonelier than the 72 plus demographic. Okay. Twinge believes that smartphones cause iGen isolation and loneliness, but perhaps it's wiser to look at just a larger phenomenon that predates the iPhone. I recently walked into a church to preach a sermon, and all the takeaways were on social media. I thought I was going to kind of preach to like college students and 20-somethings and maybe folks in their early 30s. I walk into this church, and it is no joke. 50% of the congregation is like plus 70. Gray hair everywhere. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is a bad idea. I misjudged this opportunity. So I'm like, all right, Lord, I'm going to preach. I'm going to apply this to social media, and we'll see what happens. And so I preach, and the meeting ends, and I wait around in the back of the church to talk to people, and I get swarmed by the gray heads. They all want to come and thank me. One after another, compelled to lament with me how hard it is for them to reach their grandkids. Few bear the brunt of social media abuse of tweens and teens like grandparents do. Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, those are the platforms grandparents aren't on. Okay. So online, they seem totally fenced off from their grandkids. And when they're together in person, those grandkids are glued to their screens. Okay. So one of the challenges, we must reclaim face-to-face relationships. And this is where the church is huge. Okay. A study showed that 80% of the questions that a son would ask his dad about previously, like, how do I fix a flat tire? How do I fix a bike chain? How do I ask a girl out on a date? Those types of questions, 80% of those types of questions now go directly from a son into Google or YouTube. Okay. Teens don't need parents in that sense. They don't need grandparents in that sense. There's a ready digital response for every question that they have. So this multi-generational discipleship of passing wisdom from one older generation to a younger generation has completely evaporated in American culture. And I think that's unique, not only to America, I think that's unique to human history as well. So iGeners, like their parents, need a community of faith where they can thrive, a place to serve, a place to be served, a place to find friends, a place to be envisioned for risk-taking mission, and all within a multi-generational context. This takeaway, and I've written a book on smartphones, I've written a book on mass media and social media and looked at all of them. I think this is the major takeaway. This is the advantage that we have as Christians. We have local churches that offer so many of the solutions to the fragmentation of the digital age. Keep building the local church. For many of you, you already know that. You love the local church, you're all in. But if in this season you feel your heart kind of like moving back from the local church, not seeing the importance of it, I pray that you would pray that God would give you a fresh vision for how important the local church is in your parenting of your children. Really important to see that. Finally, number 10, here we go. Finally, focus on the attentions. Focus on the affections. Focus on the affections. We talked about this a little bit in point 1. But I want to come back to this. Focus on the affections. I know that many of you wish that we had this conversation years ago. I know exactly what happens at the end of an address like this. The parents who have really small kids are thrilled. They've got a vision for their future and a list of suggestions and a new game plan, and they've got this chart where they're going to stair step everything. And then on the other hand, you have these parents with older kids, and many of them were given smartphones too soon. Okay. And parents know when they gave their kid a smartphone too soon, right? And you regret it, and it's very hard to take that back. Mistakes are made. There's condemnation and guilt that floods over you for being such a bad parent, right? You feel that. I feel that. But everything I've said here comes out of my own parenting blunders. Okay. So, young parents watching, you're learning from the mistakes of parents that have gone before you. But here's what I've learned over the years. Lots of Christians want me to boil technology ethics down to very blanket prohibitions, like, do not handle, do not touch, do not taste, like Colossians 2, just tell me what to not do, right? Just tell me what's sinful, I won't touch it. And by not touching it, I'll be virtuous. Except that's not how Christian ethics work, right? By not touching a smartphone doesn't make you holy. Okay? Not downloading TikTok doesn't make you more righteous. It doesn't work that way. The question always returns to the heart. The heart. What am I after? Why do I want an iPhone? Why do I want Twitter? Why do I want TikTok or YouTube? These heart ethics are hard because there's no shortcuts. There's no checklist. There's no easy slap-on prohibitions about what you can or cannot touch. So the fact remains, parenting in the digital age is scary. Parenting is intimidating work because that work changes from legislating behavior early on in the young years to discipling appetites in the teen years. And you can't legislate desires. You can disciple desires, I think, but you can't legislate desires. So I often get asked, is parenting in the digital age more dangerous and perilous than parenting in past generations? And I think the answer to that question is no. It's not more dangerous. And this is clear from what Jesus says in the parable of the sower. This world has always found ways to choke off God's word from thriving in the human soul. The world is always out to offer us and to our kids vanities that compete with our love for Christ. That was true 2,000 years before Instagram. And that's what makes parenting hard today. So one of the central goals of the gospel, one of the main keys to sanctification and the heart of parenting is all this wrapped up in this glorious truth that God is pushing out of our lives every desire that gets in the way of our eternal joy and our experience of more of Him. The tensions, anxieties that we feel as parents in the pit of our stomach in this digital age comes from the realization that we are waging an all-out war for the affections of our kids. And this is not a futile battle, not futile at all, not with the grace of the Father and by the power of the Spirit and through the blood of the Son, Jesus Christ. The gospel was made for the digital age. So to close, let me say this. The digital age is a threat to lazy parenting. Okay. If you like postponing hard conversations, the digital age is not going to be fun for you. Because honestly, who loves to talk to their kids about pornography and nude selfies and self-glory and peer pressure and anxiety and depression and isolation, loneliness, all those things? And yet, if you want to parent in the digital age, your passivity must die. And it can die. Right now, tonight, it can die. You can die to the idol of comfort. You can die to turning a blind eye to what your teen does on their phone. Our kids are being spiritually strangled by the lies of Satan because we parents too often think it's okay to be comfortably ignorant in what they're doing. We are sword-wielding priests on behalf of the souls of our kids, and we are daily pleading with the Holy Spirit to open the hearts of our teens. They must treasure Christ above every trifle of the digital age, or those trifles will overtake them. And that is why parenting feels so urgent today. But this is also what makes me so hopeful. And this is actually the fun part of parenting teenagers. If I can say there's a fun part of parenting teenagers, this is. When your kids are small and it's all about yes, no, black and white discipline and obedience to authority, they eventually grow into young adults. And they're getting a better read on themselves and their own hearts. What is it that makes them tick? What is it that they want? What drives me? What do I want more than anything else in this world? Parenting is huge in this moment because the smartphone is simply a black mirror that reflects back to my eyes in pixels the very deepest longings and loves of my own heart. If that's pornography, that's what you're going to find on your screen, son. And if it's self-approval, that's what you're going to find on your screen, daughter. We can tell our kids, even when no one's watching, when you look at your screen, you are making eye contact with the deepest desires of your heart, pixelated before your eyes. So what is it that you most want? Your screen will answer that question. So 2020 is a great opportunity to take the rhetorical interrogation of Isaiah 55 and apply it to our screens. That's the mantra of parenting teens. You can snap 1,000 throwaway selfies every day and get a little buzz by grabbing the attention of your peers. And then you wake up in the morning with a dehydrated soul that doesn't know what to do other than to turn again for the sugar buzz hit immediately in the morning of turning again to the screen and being affirmed by friends. And 3 hours of gaming at night won't satisfy you. You'll wake up in the morning as dry as ever. There isn't a greater privilege than to help our kids know their own hearts, to unmask the desires inside of them, and to meet the God who wants to fill their lives with a joy that is unspeakably greater than the vanities that we so often are attracted to in our phones. Wow, that was a lot. Let's pray that God would materialize some of this into our homes and our lives and our hearts. Lord, thank you for this time together, mediated through the gift of the screen. We parents want to be godly stewards of these eternal souls that you've entrusted to us. We have a priestly calling to keep the snakes out. And yet our lives and the lives of our children have never been more porous to lies, and we feel it. If we grow lazy, our kids will be exposed. Much is at stake, and we know it. That is why we are here in faith, desperate for your help. So guide us now. Make us discerning. Help us not exasperate our children. Remind us that the aim is not in raising self-righteous kids. We do not trust in filters or parental controls. We trust in you alone, because all of us have sinned digitally. All of us have turned to our screens to find what only you offer us. We're all in need of forgiveness. So you generously and willingly hold out to those who repent your grace. Thank you for the gospel. Thank you for this forgiveness. Thank you for not leaving us trapped in digital bondage. And thank you for giving us a glory greater than anything this world can offer. May we in all of our parenting point our kids back time and time again to the greatest beauty in the universe, the beauty of your beloved Son, the snake crusher, Jesus Christ, in whose blood we have hope and in whose name we pray now. Amen.
Amen. Tony, that was so good. So good. Confession, I typically don't write a lot of notes during these seminars and these talks, but I couldn't stop writing. I've got so many notes. Can't wait to go back and look at this talk again. Tony, it was practical. I mean, for any parent, any grandparent, you just gave us so many practical tools, but I so appreciate how you rooted it and grounded it in a biblical worldview, taking us back to the garden, reminding us there at the end that this is not, that it's the gospel that motivates us. But just well done, and just can't thank you enough for being with us tonight. If you don't mind, I do have a few follow-up questions regarding your talk and just some things that have been on my mind as a parent and as a pastor. You often hear people in the church say, and you mentioned them, you mentioned some of the evils, the many evils that can come about as a result of technology. And so you'll often hear Christians say, then therefore shouldn't we oppose the advancement of technology in light of the potential and possible evils? What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm in the middle of writing a whole book on God's relationship to technology and innovation, and thinking through how we best live in light of that. So understanding what tech we should adopt, why, when, how much, all of that is a massively complex issue when you zoom back and look at all the available technologies we have now or will have soon. Not just digital tech and smartphones, but genetics, driverless cars, AI, robotics, space travel. All of this stuff is just about to hit us like a tsunami. But there's two simple answers to that question. I mean, the first is someone once defined technology as anything that didn't exist when I was born. You know, and that's kind of the short-sighted view of technology that most of us have. Like, the smartphone wasn't around when I was born, therefore it's technology. But the incandescent light that's above me was made in the 19th century, therefore it's not technology. You know, and so everything you can see right now, if you look around your house, what you're wearing, what you're looking at, all of it is owing to technology. There's nothing that's not owing to technology. So I think that's one of the first things to say. Number two, I don't know of anything in the world that you can't use for evil. Okay. I mean, you could beat someone with a ESV study Bible. You could, especially a hardcover one, big, like 20-pound Bible. Anything can be used for evil, right? So I don't know that something being used for evil then makes it itself evil. The harder question is always over what technologies should we adopt into our lives? And this goes back to calling. What am I called to do? And what does God want me to accomplish with this life? And this wonderfully boiled down in Luke 10. I mean, Jesus lays it out so clearly for us in verse 25. And here's what we read. I think it's Luke 10. I think this is verse 25 and following. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put Jesus to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he, Jesus, said to him, What is written in the law? How do you read it? And he, the lawyer, answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he, Jesus, said to him, You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. Now, his answers are known as the two love commands. In two other similar accounts in the Gospels, Jesus himself is the one who makes the summary. Here, the lawyer makes the summary. But this scheming lawyer won't get the point because he's looking for self-justification. Nevertheless, the lawyer is not stupid either. He boils down the entire moral will of God into two categories. Love God with all that you are and love others as yourself. And in that second commandment, then again, is all of our family roles, our vocations, being a student, a worker, our ministry callings, all of that is in that second aspect. But by affirming the lawyer here, Jesus is not explaining how to be saved. He's not saying you're saved by the law. He's giving a portrait of what it means to be fully alive as a human on this planet, to love God and love others. These are the pillars of human flourishing. Found in the Old Testament, ministry of Jesus, no less relevant for the lives of digitally savvy Christians today. So then we ask, what technologies help me do this? What technologies hinder me from doing this? And then we make objective decisions based on those realities. Last week, I talked with some missionaries about how culture shock in international missions doesn't happen anymore. It used to be a missionary left home for years, said goodbye, left, and then entered into a new country and just got immersed in foreign culture and dealt with the shock of integration and becoming part of a different people group. Now missionaries can bring their smartphones into the nations, and that means that they can always retreat to what is familiar and friendly. Okay? So there's always a digital escape from the immersion into a given culture. There's no culture shock anymore. And that's not a good thing for the gospel when it comes to missions. So the question is, what is your purpose on the planet? How does tech help you? And where does tech hinder you? Okay. Those are the key questions. You have to live out of this purpose. You have to have this conviction of, I'm on this planet for these reasons. And here's how tech can help me. And here's how tech can hinder me. And so it's very hard without having a clear definition of why I exist on this planet to know what tech to adopt and what tech not to adopt.
Fascinating. So if you're talking to a parent, and obviously we're identifying that technology in and of itself is not evil, the human heart is evil, and our children need the gospel, then if technology is good and it's a gift from God, how practically can we encourage our children to use technology and entertainment for the glory of God?
Yeah, so number one goes back to purpose. Purpose is huge, especially as your kids get older and older and they start to have desires into certain skills, or certain career paths, or maybe missions or mothering, or there's something that's bubbling up in their heart. You see these special gifts and skills that God has given your kids. You start to envision them for what the future holds, Lord willing. I mean, none of us know the future, but we can envision some possibilities for them. I always found it interesting. I don't know where we learned this. It wasn't original to my wife and I, but like once your kid turns about 8 years old, like their future spouse is somewhere on the planet. you know? And that's crazy to think about. You start to pray with your kid for their future spouse. Like, I mean, that's just like taking them and blowing their mind to some future realm that hardly even makes sense to them. So just envisioning for the future is huge. And then by all means, use technology and media to rest and recharge, and then step back and ask if your media habits are restful and recharging or whether they are depleting. Your kids have to be at a certain age to start to see that. But like 3 hours of gaming in a night, does that deplete you, or does that recharge you for God's calling for you as a student the next day? You know, so you can always already talk about, okay, like, what is this technology doing to you? What's the media that you're investing doing to you? Is it making you better? Is it making you happier? Are you more rested or not? And so it could be that I think gaming can play a really healthy part of a life, but it can obviously, like any media, can be taken too far, and it just becomes depleting, not reinvigorating for the calling that God has given me. So I don't know how you articulate that to a kid. I don't know. I mean, I'm still wrestling with that as a dad of teenagers, trying to like help them see, like, oh, watching every Dude Perfect video 40 times through may not be helpful for your calling as a student. And yeah, I was recently at a church where I was dogging on Dude Perfect because one of my kids has an addiction with Dude Perfect, and I just happened to be in Texas, and so I knew everybody there would know who Dude Perfect was. And so I'm going on and on, just, you know, dishing on Dude Perfect. And I mean, everybody starts laughing and laughing. I'm like, why is everybody laughing? I mean, they must be in this, like, they know who Dude Perfect is. And there's a break, and there's a small silence, and the pastor in the front row says, "Hey, Tony, look behind me." And I look down, and there's one of the Dude Perfect guys in row 2. And so, of course, the whole place erupts, and I feel very embarrassed. And then I try to walk that back about how my kid can be glorifying God by watching Dude Perfect. But, you know, you're stepping alongside your kid and saying, hey, what are you seeking in this media? Is it serving you? Is it helping you? Or is it taking your attention away from what God has called you to be? For two-thirds of my teenagers, they're called to be a student. And digital media can take them away from that calling of being a good student. And so just showing them, hey, here's how media can be useful. Here's how media can take you and your attention away from what God has called you to do and be.
Speaking of taking our kids away, I mean, I think one of the fears parents have is technology divides the family. It takes time away from dinner time, from family time, from good conversation. Is it actually possible for a family to grow closer together through the use of technology?
I think it is. Our family was never like into board games. Like we tried board games, and it just never worked. But we love movie night. And so we have movie night. Every Saturday night is movie night. We get together, talk about what we're watching. It's a great opportunity. So and using media as a family breaks one of the unnoticed trends in tech that I should mention here. And that is, tech companies make more money off of us if they can render all of us down into discrete buyers of discrete devices. Okay. So no longer one phone in the center of the house, but everyone has to have their own phone. And each of us, of course, will need a particular case for that phone fitted to my own unique personality. And of course, we need headphones and ones you can stick inside your ears so nobody can trade those. You need 2 pair of heads, so the same thing works with iPads, iPods, laptops. We're targeted as individual consumers, with each of us needing a device all our own, headphones all our own. And so when you purchase technology for the family to gather around, say a television, a Wii, use video games, you break this. And so I think there are really important times to grow together using technology. And those family movie nights they're precious. And I know families that love to play video games together, and lots of technologies can be used to build camaraderie. But just know that the design of technology is to break us apart into our silos, so that when we go out to eat as a family at a restaurant, we're all on our phones in our own digital existences. So push hard against that. Don't let Apple and Android and Nintendo condition you to ignore the people around you. So yeah, I think there's a healthy way to use technology and media in a way that builds the family.
Tony, before you go, I just would love your thoughts, and I think those listening at home would love your thoughts as well. Obviously, with COVID and being in the midst of a pandemic, the world has changed, and not that it hasn't been happening for decades, but overnight, it seems like every church was obviously forced to rethink their Christian education program, the way they do discipleship. And so much of it obviously is being done through the digital medium. Do you think this progress is mostly positive or negative or a little of both?
Well, doing everything through a screen is a temporary concession during a pandemic and should not be considered normal or ideal in any way. Okay. So are screens good or bad for discipleship? I would say that they are best in serving augmentation. Digital will never replace face-to-face relationships, but they can augment our relationships. Okay. And that's what digital does best. Taking our face-to-face relationships and expanding them into more parts of our lives. But there will always remain a great need, I think, for online content and digital media to serve the world. And I say that as an employee of DesiringGod.org, so take that with a grain of salt. But you know, when you read the meditations of Jonathan Edwards back in 1740, sitting in his study, he's a pastor theologian, sitting in his study, he's holding a mariner's compass. This little device has brought continents together because now ships can go from one continent to another because of this device. And he's just sitting there meditating on this, and he's riffing on what if the global church someday will meet simultaneously without any hindrances posed by spatial boundaries. That's where his mind wanders. And so this Zoom call right now to someone from 1740 who is meditating on the mariner's compass, this Zoom call right now, me in Arizona, you in Florida, would probably render him speechless in awe and likely unconscious in shock. He would be stunned that we're doing this right now. And I think we tend to lose the awe of our technology because we get used to it and we're worse for it. So part of it is reclaiming the awe of, wow, we can meet together online virtually. It's not ideal, but that's an incredible gift from God that we can meet in the midst of a pandemic and do it in such a way that we can still meet, quote unquote, meet. It's not the same. It's a concession, but it's still amazing that God makes this option possible for us. And so it's not ideal. It's a gift. We can use it during this pandemic, and we'll all live to talk about how weird this year was. But it's a gift, technology gift, and we can use it to glorify God. And so if you think of what if God created YouTube Live, just for the purpose for churches to meet in 2020? So people making billions of dollars, YouTube personalities making millions of dollars, huge celebrity at this, huge developer making lots of cash on this. What if the whole purpose of YouTube Live was for the church to be able to gather online in 2020? See, that's how God's providence works. All technology ultimately serves the good of the bride, the good of the church. And we just need eyes to see which technologies specifically are being used for the good of the church, and to thank God for them, even as we await a better meeting face-to-face.
That's great. Tony, thank you once again for joining us tonight. Once we're past this pandemic, we'd love to have you out to Fort Lauderdale for a live evening with our families here at Coral Ridge and with our school community as well. Just a reminder, if you are tuning in tonight, please check out Tony's 2 books, Competing Spectacles and also 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. Once again, Tony Reinke is a senior writer with Desiring God. You can find a lot of his work as well on desiringgod.org, the teaching ministry of John Piper. Just want to also remind everyone, after this talk is over this evening, this This first session will be found on our YouTube page, Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church YouTube page. So feel free to go there, forward that link to maybe somebody that missed tonight that would benefit from a very practical but biblically grounded talk about how to raise children in a digital age. Our next talk in the Renewing Your Mind series will take place next Wednesday night, August 26th at 6:30 p.m. We welcome Dr. Bruce Ashford, the Provost and Professor of Theology and Culture from Southeastern Seminary. He will be talking on culture shaping Christians, how to bring hope to a broken world. And you can find the talk tonight and future speakers and talks at crpc.org/RYM. So once again, thanks for being with us tonight, and may the Lord bless you and keep you, and we'll see you right back here at crpc.tv for next week's talk with Bruce Ashford for the Renewing Your Mind series.